morning, everyone. My name is Deb Fewster. I'm the Manager of Advocacy and Engagement at VCOSS, the Victorian Council of Social Service. And I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we all meet on Aboriginal land and pay our respects to elders past and present and to emerging leaders. And I'd particularly like to extend my respect to any Aboriginal people in our virtual room today. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this joint event convened by VCOSS in partnership with our colleagues at Jobs Victoria. Last November's state budget made landmark investments in job creation, and a central pillar of this is the establishment of the Jobs Victoria Fund. Today's event is designed to provide you with information about this fund, and it's really, I guess, evidence of VCOSS's commitment to connecting the community sector to funding opportunities and supporting workforce development and growth. So we're going to open the session today with a formal presentation from Jobs Victoria. We've got our colleagues, Laura and Felix, who will speak with you shortly. That presentation will go up to around 10 minutes and it will be followed by a Q&A. Now, I know my colleague Amy from VCOSS has provided some written instructions around how this will work, but just to help you with that and support that, just to let you know that there is a Q&A box that you'll see on your screen, and that's the place where you can type your questions for Laura and for Felix. Just to note, we will attempt to get through as many questions as we can today. We will have the VCOSS team monitoring that Q&A box and I guess moderating the questions, not to censor those questions, but where we can see questions that are very alike, we'll kind of group those together and we'll also, I guess, introduce a little bit of kind of flow in terms of if there's similar or complementary questions, we'll try and pull those together as well so that they're answered in the same section of the presentation today. There might be some instances where the team is not able to answer your specific question on the spot. Please rest assured that VCOSS will be noting all of those questions and we will be working offline with the Jobs Victoria team to come back to you with an answer. And I know that many of you, not just the person that asks the question, but the rest of you will also be potentially interested in those answers that are of questions that are addressed offline. So we'll make sure that we actually circulate that information to everyone who is in this virtual event today. So without further ado, it's now my pleasure to introduce Laura to take us through a presentation, and she'll be supported by Felix. Thank you everyone for joining us today, and thank you to our interpreters.
Thank you, Deb, and thanks to you and your colleagues at VCOSS for providing us with this opportunity. It's a very exciting program that we're very pleased to speak to you all about, and thanks for so many people making time early on a Monday, first thing in what I'm sure is a very busy week, to come and hear about the new Jobs Victoria Fund. Before I get into the fund, I'm keen to speak a bit about what Jobs Victoria has been set up to do. So we're a new organisation within the Department of Jobs, Precincts and Regions in the Victorian Government. Set up in response to the huge impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on Victorian job seekers and also employers, building on the foundations of the Jobs Victoria Employment Network, which has been operating since 2016, and also more recently on the Working for Victoria Fund, which has been great success since last year, placing more than 12,000 Victorians into jobs. And I'm pleased to see several Working for Victoria partner organisations and employers here on the line with us today. And before kicking off to tell you a bit about Jobs Victoria and the new wage subsidy fund, the Jobs Victoria Fund, it's worth acknowledging that you know, where we're at in the state's recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. The labour market, I think it's fair to say, is performing a little bit better than we might have expected 6 or so months ago. That's a really good outcome. It's not performing better though if you're facing barriers to employment. I note that unemployment is still very high for young people, up around 15%, was reported last week that unemployment for long-term unemployed was at a 26-year high post-pandemic. And we know that people who face extra barriers to employment need more help than ever. We also know that employers in many instances are struggling to find good workers in their area, people who are able to do the work. And we're really hoping that this program, the Jobs Victoria Fund, is able to support job seekers who need help back into work, but also help employers, including in the community sector, find the people they need to do what they need to do. So I might invite my colleague Trevor to start sharing his screen. Now I'm going to speak to the first few slides, and then my colleague Felix Neighbour, who heads up our stakeholder engagement team, will provide a bit more information about the fund itself. Thanks, Trevor. Just on to the next slide. So, as Deb said, Jobs Victoria is the result of a record $619 million investment from the November budget last year to help Victorians back into work and to help employers find people for their organisation. We recognise that many people need extra support, information and advice to get back into the workplace. We know that Victorians and job seekers have different needs, and that we need to tailor our services to their needs to make sure that they get the help that they need and get back into work. So Trevor, if you wouldn't mind moving to the next slide, I'll show you just a bit about the different services that Jobs Victoria has on offer. I should say that all Victorian job seekers are eligible for a level of support based on their need. It's different to the Commonwealth's employment service system in that it's entirely voluntary. We also take a very local and place-based approach to the way our services roll out, and have a very strong focus on developing local networks of employment service providers, employers, community organisations to help make sure we're helping people in a coordinated and joined up way. And really our supports are designed as an integrated system of services that are meant to make the experience very easy, whether it's a job seeker or an employer. So the graph I have here on this slide, and I hope it's okay to see there, presents the journey for a job seeker who might approach Jobs Victoria for help. So there are 3 ways to access our services and to access and navigate the service system. Online through our new online hub. On the phone, we've got a new dedicated hotline available to job seekers and employers, or also in person. And it's been really pleasing to roll out the first of our 100 advocates, Jobs Victoria advocates across the Victorian community over the last few weeks. We've partnered with 40 organisations to host advocates in communities. And the purpose of those is to operate in the community, reach out to and identify people looking for work, moving around the community, going to shopping centres, libraries, train stations, and hearing people's story. Really great. We've been blown away by the calibre of advocates who have been recruited into those roles, many of whom speak multiple languages and are very experienced and from and of the communities that they serve, which is fantastic. So that's how you access support from Jobs Victoria if you're a job seeker. Then we tailor our support to you by way of our Jobs Victoria mentor network. So this is building on the old Jobs Victoria employment network, where we've received funding to essentially triple that network, and we're in the process of doing that at the moment, so that we can provide personalised one-on-one face-to-face support to job seekers, place them into roles directly, and provide support to employers and job seekers to make sure that job sticks. I've mentioned the advocates. We're also standing up a brand new career counselling service. This is for job seekers who perhaps are more job ready, but they've found that they need to change careers as a result of the impact of the pandemic. Perhaps they've worked traditionally in retail or in tourism or another sector that's going to be much slower to recover. And career counsellors will help them find pathways into sectors that are growing, that have workforce shortages, into training if that's required, or straight into work where that's the preference. And thirdly, all of our services are dedicated towards leading to a job for anyone we work with. So there are a few things that we're doing to facilitate that. The first one, and the main thing we want to talk to you about today, is the Jobs Victoria Fund. This is a $250 million program to create at least 10,000 subsidised jobs for job seekers who need extra help to get back to work. We're also working closely across government to leverage opportunities as a result of the social procurement framework, so leveraging government investment to create inclusive employment opportunities for Victorians. And we also have local job placement opportunities by partnering with our mentors, our Jobs Victoria services, and through the online network where on our online hub, new job opportunities are placed all the time, and the community sector is encouraged and welcomed and supported to recruit using our online hub as a free and easy to use service. Thanks, Trevor. We might move to the next slide. So I'll, by way of introducing the Jobs Victoria Fund, now Felix I'll throw to in a moment. He will talk more about the specific criteria, which I know people will be very interested in, and talk about how to apply. In the main, though, the fund is being administered in two distinct streams. So the first is what we call the open stream, and employers can apply to access wage subsidies of up to $20,000 for a maximum of 20 people, and that's calculated in full-time equivalent terms. And that's to employ job seekers who've been most impacted by the economic impacts of the pandemic. Felix will talk more to the specifics, but this is designed to be easy to access through a new online form. Employers in the community sector are encouraged to take up these opportunities, and we've already started processing the first of the applications to come through the pipeline since the fund opened just before Easter. And we're getting a pretty good turnaround on those assessments and approvals. The second stream is called the innovation stream. Now, this is really for organisations or groups of organisations who are able to create job opportunities at scale for priority job seekers, people who have been most impacted by the pandemic. We're talking sort of 100 positions or more. And some funding has been set aside in the fund for this innovation stream to develop strategic partnerships where we might structure up, earn and learn opportunities, training pathways, develop up opportunities at scale for job seekers and employers in areas of workforce demand where we need to provide a bit of extra structure, training, mentoring, or other supports to make the job stick. I might throw to you, Felix, to kick off from the next slide. Thanks.
Yes, thanks, Laura. This is the first of a few slides on eligibility. So, as Laura mentioned, there are some groups that have been most impacted by the pandemic, and they are the groups that we're prioritising. So, to qualify, a job seeker must be someone from at least one of the groups on the slides that I'll talk through now. So, there's two levels of subsidy, level 1 and level 2. For the level 1 wage subsidy, that's 20,000 per 1 FTE on a pro rata basis. We have women over 45, long-term unemployed people, so people unemployed for 6 months or more, job seekers registered with a Jobs Victoria partner, so that might include the Jobs Victoria Employment Network providers, for example, or the mentors that Laura referred to on her earlier slide. Aboriginal and or Torres Strait Islander people, people with disability, people seeking asylum or refugees, and newly arrived migrants from non-English speaking backgrounds. For the level 2 wage subsidy, we have $10,000 per 1 FTE pro rata. That includes young people under 25, people over 45, veterans, and people previously employed under the Working for Victoria initiative. Now, before we move on to the next slide, I just want to point out that where an employer employs a job seeker, in both groups listed under level 1 and level 2, the higher payment applies. So, for example, if an employer employs an Aboriginal and or Torres Strait Islander woman under 25, the higher subsidy would apply. If we can move to the next slide now. Thank you, Trevor. So, we want to make sure that this fund is available to as many organisations as possible. So I'll just go through the slide around employer eligibility. So to apply for the fund, you need to be the employer, have a Victorian address, have work cover insurance, hold an Australian business number or an Australian company number if applicable, have a payroll tax of less than $20 million in the financial year before the application was made. This payroll tax criteria is really around businesses, but we've included it just for completeness. The only ineligible employers are Victorian Public Service, the Australian Public Service, and Commonwealth and Victorian public sector entities. Just to clarify, local councils are eligible. And as mentioned previously, if you have a payroll tax of greater than $20 million for the financial year before, you would be ineligible for the fund. Next slide, please. So this last slide on eligibility is around job eligibility. So for a job to be supported through the Jobs Victoria Fund, it must be for a minimum of 12 months. It must not displace existing employees, i.e. it cannot result in any existing employees being stood down or experience a reduction in work hours. Jobs must be permanent or fixed term for at least 19 hours per week, so not casual. And jobs must provide at least legal minimum wages and entitlements as specified in the relevant awards. On the flip side, ineligible jobs are casual jobs, permanent or fixed term jobs for less than 19 hours per week, periodic employment, such as engagements that are short term in nature. So for example, on a weekly hire basis, and importantly, jobs that offer a full-time salary or wages above 120,000 per annum. So if we could just move to the next slide now, Trevor. We thought it would be useful for this session just to talk through a couple of scenarios that might be useful to know for the community sector. So the Jobs Victoria Fund will provide a range of options we believe to support the community sector whilst creating work for job seekers facing barriers to employment. So we've got a couple of scenarios here. So scenario one would be that an ongoing staff member in an organisation leaves to pursue another role. A new staff member with disability commences in that role. The organisation can apply for a subsidy of $20,000 to employ the new staff member for a minimum of 12 months on a full-time basis. Secondly, noting that there's a few organisations here today that receive funding through Working for Victoria, we thought we'd provide a second scenario on that. So the second scenario is if an organisation has employed 2 staff members through Working for Victoria, one staff member is a young person under 25, the other staff member is a woman over the age of 45, and the organisation would like to continue to employ both employees. So in this scenario, the organisation is eligible to apply for subsidies of $10,000 and $20,000 respectively to keep both workers on for at least another 12 months full time. Okay, on to the next slide. So just to recap, just some important points. Applications are now open. New staff must have started in their new role from 16th of March 2021. Employers must hire new staff from the priority groups before they apply. The Jobs Victoria online hub can assist with recruitment of priority job seekers. At this point, I think it's good to clarify that the online hub is the new word for the Working for Victoria platform, as some people might know it. Employers can apply as many times as they like. Assessments will commence in the order applications are submitted, and the fund remains open until it is exhausted. So guidelines are available on the website, and there's a hotline and email address as well. Okay, next slide, please, Trevor. So we'd be now happy to open up for questions from the audience. Laura, any final words?
No, that's great. Thanks, Felix. I believe our colleagues, Deb and co at VCOSS will be moderating the questions. So over to you.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for that presentation, Laura and Felix. It's Deb Fewster speaking again. So we've got a number of questions coming through the Q&A, which is fantastic. Keep them coming and we will make sure to get through them as quickly as we can. So just to start off with, Laura, you did mention that, that the fund opened just before Easter and that you've already started processing applications and making really good progress on that. Just wondering, will a proportion of the fund be quarantined for the community services sector? Just wondering what's the risk that the fund could be depleted by, I guess, industries and employers who might be able to move more quickly to secure the opportunity?
Yeah, thanks, Deb, for the question. So we absolutely want the community sector to take up this opportunity. Yes, the fund has opened, but it is safe to say there is plenty of capacity left. I think it's a 2-year program, and while funding, once funding runs out, we expect the program to end. We are not expecting that to happen anytime soon. Based on the trends we're seeing, you'll be absolutely fine if you're able to take up this opportunity. You don't have to get your application in by Friday. You don't have to quickly hire someone tomorrow. Over the coming months, you will be absolutely fine taking up this opportunity. And, we're here to support people to apply. If there's anything ambiguous about the guidelines, if you're wondering how they apply to you, you can just give us a call, send us an email, and we will work with you to make sure you're able to take up the opportunity. I hope that answers the question, Deb.
Thank you so much. It's great to have that assurance, Laura. A number of the organisations on the call today are organisations that specialise in working with young people. So just noting that, I guess, the tiered subsidies as well, and noting the different priority cohorts. There's, I guess, just a sense from some people on the call today wondering why, given that youth unemployment is a persistent problem across Victoria and was pre-COVID, why do young people only attract half the wage subsidy of other priority cohorts?
Absolutely, it's a really good question. So we've designed the scheme very intentionally to allow employers to take up this wage subsidy opportunity alongside other subsidies that are available at the moment. So the Commonwealth has the Job Maker hiring scheme, which provides around $10,000 to employ a young person in your organisation, we encourage people to take up both subsidies together. And as a result, at this stage, the subsidy for young people is at that 10,000 mark, acknowledging that most employers either have already taken up that Commonwealth subsidy or will do so for eligible young people. At the point at which the Commonwealth stop rolling out that job maker hiring scheme, we will absolutely revise the level of subsidy we have available for young people, because we absolutely recognise they are among the most impacted people, as I said earlier at the start of the presentation. So it's done that way to complement what's already out there, not to send a signal that young people are, yes, less important.
Great, thanks. That's a really important clarification, Laura, so I appreciate that. There's a question, I guess, from people as well who've had experience with working with Victoria, the distinct scheme that precedes this one here with the Jobs Victoria Fund. And I guess there's a reflection that under working for Victoria, there's an understanding that in addition to wage subsidies, there were some kind of instances, some special circumstances where the department, for example, could assist with some additional support. So in addition to the wage subsidies, for example, the department could potentially support or assist with relocation costs if a worker was moving from Melbourne to fill a role in regional Victorian area where there was kind of acute skills shortages and workforce needs. Is that kind of complementary or additional support available through the Jobs Victoria Fund, or is it just literally the wage subsidy?
Yeah, what I would say there is the level of subsidy is capped at $20,000 for a full-time employee. How the employer allocates those funds to attract and retain that worker is really up to the employer. So what we'll expect of you is that you can employ them into steady and secure work for a period of 12 months. If you need to use part of that subsidy perhaps to support some training costs for your worker to get them up to speed, that's okay.
Yeah. And so just in that vein as well, Laura, is that also kind of, I guess, the case, different cohort, different needs, but for example, if someone is employing a job seeker with a disability and the job seeker identifies that they have some adjustments that need to be made in the workplace, which are very reasonable and they have a right to request those adjustments, again, is the employer expected to cover those through the wage subsidy or any other kind of resources it has at its disposal? Is that the case?
Yeah, that's right. That would absolutely be an appropriate use of the subsidy. Really, and that's really what the subsidy is there to do, is to make it easier for and to incentivise employers to employ people who face these barriers to employment. Now, obviously, with the community sector, we're very fortunate that it's the space you operate in already, but absolutely, it's a very, very valid use of the subsidy to do that, Deb. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Now there's a question as well that's come through the Q&A, and I'll read it verbatim. So, would you be eligible if you have an existing staff member on a 6-month contract and you extend their contract for a further 6 months? Does that attract the wage subsidy?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think if the person would otherwise have finished with your organisation at the end of those 6 months, and the subsidy is to provide a further 12 months of employment to that person, and they're an eligible employee under the scheme, one of the cohorts that Felix mentioned, yes, I would see that as an appropriate application. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And there's also a very specific question here. I'm not sure whether this one can be answered kind of at a principles level, Laura, whether it might need to be clarified and taken offline. But there's a question about the eligibility for funds and application of the fund where, it might be part-time work and it's job sharing. So, for example, it might be kind of, split across like 19 hours, like 2 workers and 19 hours each, for example. That's quite a nuanced question. I'm not sure if you're able to kind of answer that on the spot, but I'll put it out there to you.
Yeah, I'll start with the principle and then go to the sort of guidelines. And I saw a question about part-time in the chat as well. So absolutely, the fund is to support part-time employment arrangements. I didn't sort of labour the point in my presentation, but I should have said, a big focus for the government with this fund is to support the employment of women, and in particular women over 45. And of course, we know that in order to do that effectively, we've got to make flexible work arrangements and part-time work arrangements central to this scheme. We do have a minimum number of hours though, and at that stage that's set at 19 hours per employee. And the wage subsidy itself, as Felix said, will be calculated on a pro rata basis for those part-time hours. So absolutely no issue in principle with job share arrangements as long as those criteria are met, Deb.
Fantastic. You've done well with that question, Laura, because I think I garbled the articulation of it with the 19 hours. So thank you. Excellently handled. And I hope the person who asked that question is satisfied with that response. Thank you. There's a question here around employers who were involved with working for Victoria. So if there's a scenario where the employer wants to keep the worker on full-time post their contract ending and wants to access the wage subsidy, what's the situation if the worker kind of falls out of the priority cohorts or the categories mentioned? Are they still able to access the fund?
Yeah, they absolutely are, Deb, and that, I guess, recognises that, were it not for the fund, those people might have been out of work and unemployed for a long period of time. So yes, they're eligible. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Another question that's come through, could Laura please further clarify if the subsidy would apply for a 6-month extension of a working for Victoria funded role, or must the extension be a 12-month minimum?
Yeah, I think that's a hard eligibility for us is the 12-month minimum. Really what we're about is creating steady and secure employment opportunities for a longer period of time than 6 months. So working for Victoria most of those roles were funded for a 6-month period in recognition that it was a kind of emergency stopgap measure. Where we're really setting up this fund to transition people into long-term employment throughout the economic recovery. Yeah.
Thanks, Laura. And on that, this next question is kind of very relevant to that framing. So the question is, can I limit the employment contract to the length of the subsidy?
Well, it's up to the employer to determine the employment arrangements it has with the employee, as long as our minimum criteria are met of 12 months.
Fantastic.
Or more.
I'd say ideally, if at all possible, if an employer could keep on the person for more than 12 months, that would be a really great outcome for the job seeker as well.
Yeah, thank you, Felix. I guess that's where I was probably coming from. It's about the aspiration of the policy, the high level policy, which is around sustainable work and a pipeline of kind of job creation. So thank you. That's I guess an important distinction around how things might play out in practice, but what the policy aspiration is, and that's important for us all to kind of keep in mind. Another question is, does the fund apply to traineeship and apprenticeship positions?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely it does. Yep.
Great. That was very straightforward.
Yep.
Another question that we have is, do I have to use the Jobs Victoria hub and or the local Jobs Victoria partners?
So no, employers are able to recruit workers through any means they like. I would say the hub is a good way to recruit, and we've recently made some changes to the hub to make it easier for employers to, I guess, target eligible job seekers who fit into the categories that we're targeting. So it's a good way to go about it. And we also have our Jobs Victoria services who are always wanting to partner with employers to support people facing barriers to employment into work. So we're providing a couple of options and supports to employers to recruit, but absolutely it's not a requirement. You're able to recruit through whatever channels are easiest and best for you to use.
Fantastic. There's a couple of process questions that probably go together. So it's around, you know, at which point the organisation makes the application for the wage subsidy, when they're kind of, you know, the order in which they kind of hire people, apply for the subsidy, or vice versa. And so the question is, can Jobs Victoria give me a written assurance of my future eligibility for the wage subsidy before I make an offer of employment? So that's one bit of the question. Then I'll ask another complementary bit.
Yeah, so unfortunately, we can't provide a sort of upfront guarantee before you apply. But again, we have tried to make it as easy as possible to for employers to understand their eligibility. On our website, we've got a few different tools. There's like a quick eligibility checklist. There's a more detailed sort of rundown of everything you need to know. There's, of course, the guidelines. And if there's any ambiguity at all, please just give us a call, drop us an email, and we will resolve that ambiguity for you and do our very best to do so. So we absolutely understand that we're asking employers to hire people and then access this scheme, and that therefore they need a level of confidence that they will be successful in securing funding. And so we've tried to make that as easy as possible with really transparent information online. Yeah, does that answer your question, Deb? I guess the only other thing I would say is, you know, in our assessment process, it's very much you know, if you meet the criteria, you will get the funding. It's considered a kind of a minimum benchmark, if you like, and there's no you know, subjective process here. If you meet the criteria, you will receive funding. So we really want to give employers that confidence to participate. And if you're not sure, just give us a call.
Sure. And just thinking on that, I know it's a different scheme to working for Victoria, but I think with that, one of the lessons was that what we knew over time was that Jobs Victoria was kind of providing signals via VCOSS and others when we thought the fund was close to being exhausted, so that people are, you know, aware of that kind of context or environment, or the communication is kind of ensuring that people are being set up for success rather than having kind of their expectations dashed. Just on that as well, in terms of the process, so there's a question in the Q&A, does a new application need to be put in for each employee? How does that work?
You could do it as part of one application, but you do need to provide us with information about each person for whom you're seeking the subsidy. Similarly, or you know, you might like to put in separate applications because you're taking people on at different times. That's absolutely fine, as long as the total number of employers you're seeking the subsidy for is 20 people.
Can I just chip in and say, as part of the process, there's also an employee consent form. This is really important from the job seeker's perspective. And that's really just to make sure that the job seeker is being placed into the right role, and also provides an opportunity for that job seeker to disclose whether they identify with one of the priority groups. And of course, that's optional. We want to make this as safe as possible, but there's also that employee consent form process in the job seeker perspective as well.
Thank you, Felix. That's great. There's also a question in the Q&A. Does 6 months long-term unemployment include underemployment? For example, a new staff member may have had casual work, but will be appointed into a full-time role.
Yes, it does. Yeah. Felix will remind me the exact number of hours. I think it's 8 hours a week.
So I'm a little bit less, so I'm a little bit more. Sorry, for the purposes of these guidelines, a person who works no more than 16 hours per fortnight in total is considered under casual employment arrangements is considered underemployed, but that's in the guidelines, and we can clarify after the call as well in writing as well.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're able to offer employment to someone who's working less than 16 hours a fortnight, and you're able to offer them over 19 hours per week and guarantee those hours for 12 months, then yes, you would be eligible for that person.
Great. I've got another question here from the Q&A, which I think you might have answered in a way by example when you were talking about the support that's available for young job seekers. But the question is, it's worth kind of really kind of unequivocally clarifying this. The question is, can I use Jobs Victoria funds to top up or stretch other government funding?
Yeah, I think I did touch on that. So it is designed to complement other wage subsidies and similar schemes that are out there. We just ask as part of the application process that employers declare what else they're receiving. The one thing I would clarify though is so that we don't have double counting, we ask that employers aren't using the scheme to claim jobs that they might have committed to under the social procurement framework targets that you might have signed on to as part of a government program or service. That they're very specific circumstances though, and if there's any ambiguity there, just give us a call and we can talk about it. But by and large, the intention is that this is complementing other schemes.
If I might just add, it's in response to an earlier question, I guess. So in terms of people with disability, for example, we're aware that sometimes people need Auslan interpreters or cost for reasonable adjustments. The job access scheme is one example of a existing subsidy or funding scheme that can also be accessed as well.
Fantastic, thank you. I think that there's probably minimal risk that that this fund will be undersubscribed, but there is a question asking, just in case, just to clarify, is there a date by which the fund will have to close, irrespective of whether it's been exhausted?
Yeah, it's been set up as a 2-year program. If the funding is expended before, then it would close earlier, but we're absolutely conscious of the need to provide clear information about that to people who might be considering making an application. So yeah, 2 years, but the funding might run out first, but we won't just let it fall off a cliff. We'll provide plenty of notice as it's running out, and we're nowhere near that yet. While we've been pleased with the early uptake, it's, you know, there's plenty of capacity left in the fund. Yeah, I know there's a lot of different programs and opportunities out there in this period, and it's probably pretty confusing if you're an employer trying to navigate it all. So, you know, it's not like we're absolutely drowning in applications and it's going to vanish in the next 2 weeks. That's just not the case.
Great, thank you. And just on that, Laura, I guess today is a really great example of how we really, VCOSS and the department want to work together, the Jobs Victoria team, just to make sure that we're helping you join the dots and understanding what the different opportunities are that are available to community sector employers, because we know that this industry is and can be an absolute engine room for job creation, and we're aware of how acute the kind of the workforce needs are for your organisations. Felix, did you want to jump in before I go to the next point?
Yeah, I think just a point of difference from working for Victoria. So organisations on this call will be aware that under working for Victoria, there were certain roles that could be funded under working for Victoria. Under the Jobs Victoria Fund, the eligibility for roles is much broader. So as long as the roles meet the criteria and they're not over 120,000, community sector orgs can apply for really any role in their organisation. So I think that's just a useful point of clarification as well.
Fantastic, thank you. Now we've got 15 minutes to go. We do have questions to keep working through, but I will just give another shout out to the Q&A box. It looks like it's getting pretty busy in there, but don't be put off. If you've got a question, put it in there. We'll try and get through it in the next 15 minutes. And if not, we assure you that we'll take it offline and come back to you with a response. We want to make sure that we satisfy all your information needs today. The next question from the Q&A chat is, why has 19 hours been set as the minimum for part-time roles?
Yeah, that's it's a good question. We had the same setting with the Working for Victoria Fund, and I guess the thing we're trying to balance here is making sure that we're incentivising steady and secure employment for job seekers. We know that insecure work is and underemployment are huge issues in the labour market, and we're trying to address those through this scheme. So we do have to set the bar somewhere, I suppose. I'm at the same time really conscious that, you know, people who face barriers to employment, you know, and our target cohorts like women and women over 45, you know, are balancing all sorts of other responsibilities in their life. And for some people, it just might not work for them to work a minimum of 19 hours per week. So we will be monitoring the uptake of the fund and monitoring it to see, you know, is that 19 hours creating an issue? Is it creating a kind of a disincentive or a problem for reaching the job seekers that we wish to reach through this program? And if that's the case, you know, we'll look at our settings and we'll adjust. But at this stage, 19 hours is the kind of happy spot that we've identified that balances that need to retain flexibility for job seekers and employers, while also ensuring we're providing steady and secure work through the fund.
Thanks, Laura. And I think the other thing to kind of add, as you say, is that we're kind of continuously in this active learning space in this policy area. And so for the person that asked that question, if you've kind of got anything else that you would like to share with us around the context for why you're asking that question, we would be really interested in hearing a bit more about that, because that helps us, I guess, ultimately shape, refine, etc., inform kind of future policy development. And in saying that, I'm not trying to create any expectations or obligations on my Jobs Victoria staff. It's just to say that all of this feedback is very valued by VCOSS, and I know by Jobs Victoria as well. There's a specific question that we've got here, which I think is a good question in terms of illustrating some questions or concerns around eligibility criteria, particularly if we're thinking about that cohort of workers that came through Working for Victoria and employers who want to look for opportunities to try and keep them on. We know some of those workers have only recently kind of come into their roles, that kind of last lot of Working for Victoria staff. So the question is, I have a great worker who we obtained through the Working for Victoria website. The worker commenced full-time work with us on Monday, the 15th of March this year. And the Jobs Victoria criteria is from Tuesday, the 16th of March. Is this a problem?
Yeah, so in most cases, the worker needs to have been brought on after the 16th of March when the fund was announced, when the scheme was announced. Working for Victoria is a different kettle of fish, though, in that, we recognise that because of the timelines of the scheme, Working for Victoria employees will mostly have started earlier. So yes, it's okay. I guess they're the exception to that rule. They would still be eligible. If the other conditions are met around providing a further 12 months to them. And for employers who were our partners through Working for Victoria, the new subsidy can only kick in once your Working for Victoria funding has been expired, if you like, just to clarify that too.
Thank you, Laura. Another one here, this is kind of more inviting your reflections and feedback rather than kind of like something that's quite a binary answer. And the question is, are there any other unique requirements that you think a community sector employer should be aware of? So a bit more of a creative question. So thinking in your feet, Laura and Felix, are there any unique requirements that you can think of for this sector?
Absolutely welcome Felix jumping in too. But what I would say is, we've gone to, great lengths to make the application process as easy as possible for employers of all sectors. There is still a bit of documentation that you'll need to pull together in order to apply. And Felix has mentioned the employee consent forms. We'll also look for a statutory declaration for us to be assured of a few things. It's not specific to the community sector, but just be aware that there's a bit of work in the application, and the process allows you to start the application, save it, come back and keep going. But you just might need to set aside, half an hour to an hour to work that through.
Yeah, and I can add to that.
Yeah.
Sorry, Laura.
Go, Felix.
I can add to that. So for not-for-profits, the guidelines, you'll see that we do ask for not-for-profits to be registered with the Australian Charities and Not-for-Profits Commission. However, if that for whatever reason isn't the case, please call us or email us, and we can discuss that with you.
Great, thank you. Now, I know that it looks like there's still some questions in the Q&A, but they actually have been asked, as far as I understand. So it looks like they're kind of queuing up in there, but we've gotten through them. A last question, and if anyone's got anything else they'd like to put into the Q&A that hasn't been covered, please let us know. So we've got one more question and one more, I guess, comment. I might go with the comment first, and it just speaks to that point we were talking about, that inviting feedback and being kind of in that active learning space. There is a comment that's come through in the Q&A in regard to that 19 hours conversation, and the comment is that the 19 hours will create a barrier for older women due to work life and family balance. So just something to note there. Thank you for providing that feedback. And we know that for the state government, for the Jobs Victoria team, that providing good job, decent work that responds to the needs of older women in particular is a priority. So thank you for that feedback. I'm sure the team will note that.
Deb, can I just
yep.
just chip in there? Like, we understand that the community sector might have specific barriers or challenges that are quite unique to the sector. This is the value of this initial conversation and our partnership with VCOSS. So we're really keen to hear whether there's particular barriers or issues such as the one that's mentioned that are specific to the sector. So we've said it a few times, but just want to kind of reinforce that again.
Thank you. And there's two more questions. The one that was kind of banked up, which I'll go to next, is what if the new employee changes roles in my organisation? For example, they might be promoted during the 12 months. Is that an issue? How does that work?
No, I don't see that as being an issue. It's a good outcome for the person and the organisation. So no, if you can demonstrate that they're still employed by the organisation over that 12-month period, you'd still be eligible to receive that subsidy over the full period of time.
It would be really great to hear about outcomes like that, though. Like, if this is leading to career development within the sector, we do want to hear about that as well. Yeah.
That's great. And it's Deb speaking on that, Felix. How would that be picked up? How would you want employers to share that with you? Does that come through, I guess, any kind of reporting that's done during the acquittal of funds, or how would you like to hear those stories?
I guess, Laura, like in the milestones, or, if it's something an organisation is really enthused to share with us earlier, just email the Jobs Victoria inbox with the name of the organisation. Could be something that's good to promote earlier than the milestone, perhaps. So.
Fantastic. Thank you, Felix. And then there's one question which is kind of circling back to a question that was asked earlier. So there is a request for a bit more clarification around, and I'll just read the question out verbatim. Could Laura please further clarify if the subsidy would apply for a 6-month extension of a Working for Victoria funded role, or must the extension be 12 months minimum? Thank you.
12 months, yeah, must be 12 months.
Great. Thank you for answering that, for that clarity. Now we're at 12:26. We've only got a few minutes left. As far as I'm aware, there aren't any new questions that have come in that have been unaddressed. Apologies if I've kind of misunderstood that. We will, as I said, come back to you. Oh, one's just popped up on my phone, which is, will there be fortnightly reporting as with Working for Victoria?
I don't believe so, Felix. That might be one we need to take on notice, Deb, and confirm the reporting requirements, as it's actually managed out of a different team, but I'm keen to do so people know what they're signing on to.
Fantastic.
Yeah, we'll follow up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's Deb speaking again. There is a question as well. Can we confirm the slides will be provided afterwards? And I think something has simultaneously popped up in the chat that says, we'll send out a follow-up email with the slides. So I've asked that question and it's been answered in the chat. So thank you.
Sorry, Deb, can I just, I know we're almost up to time. We can also share an engagement pack that we know that community organisations are really well connected within their broader networks. If anybody on this call wants to promote the fund to other employers to recruit people from our priority job seeker cohorts, we're really keen for you to have you to share that information with others as well.
Fantastic. So there'll be a series of resources that come out following this event, and that will include the engagement pack that Felix has just mentioned. So thank you everyone for your time today. This past hour has absolutely flown. I want to thank you all for making the time to attend. It's a big chunky event to attend at the beginning of the week on a Monday morning. So I know there's been a lot to take in. I hope that you found it really helpful. Welcome any feedback that you might have if you want to contact VCOSS with any feedback around how you found this event. Really want to thank our colleagues Laura and Felix from Jobs Victoria for carving out the time this morning to spend this time with the sector, and it's great for that affirmation of the kind of the value of the community services sector. So thank you, and thank you to your team behind the scenes as well. I know Trevor has been busy supporting you with driving that PowerPoint presentation earlier, so thank you to your colleague Trevor. I'd like to thank the VCOSS team, which includes Amy, our events guru, Jared Lenny as well, and Charlotte Newbold, who are the policy advisors working on this. And I also, as always, really want to thank our Auslan interpreters and our captioner for making this an accessible event. This is something that's non-negotiable, that we take that responsibility really seriously. So thank you to I can see Philip there and Kim for supporting the accessibility of this event today. That's a wrap, and I might just finish with one positive comment that's come through the Q&A. It's a comment rather than a question, and that is someone has actually shared that one of their Working for Victoria employees has already received a promotion. So that's terrific. That's terrific news. Thank you, everyone. Look forward to getting together with you again soon, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Deb. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.